Ancient Rome was one of the largest cities of its age and bustled with an incredible amount of activity. With over 1 million people, you can imagine that things could quite easily get out of hand. Things like traffic, theft, riots, murder, and fire threaten to consume a city if left unchecked. In our modern lives, we take for granted that such issues will be dealt with by public services such as the police or firefighters. But what if you were an inhabitant of the ancient world? Today we'll be exploring what it was like to police ancient Rome. This video was sponsored by Magellan TV. They're an awesome documentary streaming service run by filmmakers with a selection of over 2,000 videos to choose from the categories of history, science, nature, space, and more. When it comes to history documentaries, Magellan TV has the richest and most varied content anywhere. Ancient, modern, current, war, biography, and even related genres like science and crime, which are historical in nature. If you like our content, I can highly recommend you check out the documentary series Meet the Romans, which focuses on the everyday life of people in ancient Rome. Magellan TV is compatible with Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, Google Play, and iOS, which means you can watch it anytime, anywhere, on your television, laptop, or mobile device. Sign up today to get a 1-month free membership trial by visiting the link in the description below or going to magellantv.com/invicta. In the modern world, when we think of police, the first image that comes to mind is a uniformed officer. While standards are not universal, there is a general understanding of what they are there to do. Police ought to be adept at any number of things, including enforcing the law, maintaining public order, investigating and solving crimes, operating as witnesses for those crimes, regulating traffic, arbitrating disputes, enforcing regulations, and engaging in undercover covert operations. In short, they are a versatile tool of the state that is used in a variety of ways to ensure order is upheld. The Roman Empire had no such police force, which fell under the umbrella of organized law enforcement. Rather, what you had was a hodgepodge of different groups independently maintaining order within various spheres of activity. As was common for the time, their main goal was the preservation of the city and overall body politic, and not the protection of individuals from unjust or illegal action. During the Republican period, these duties were split among the magistracies which governed Rome. Let's recap these various positions and the responsibilities. The consul, the highest officials, were tasked with large-scale investigations and operations. They would act in putting down rebellions and revolts, clearing major bandit and pirate infestations, and even hunting down groups that were seen as subversive to the state, such as in the case of the Bacchanalian cults during the 2nd century. The censors, who were responsible for maintaining the count of people, especially the wealthy in Rome, were responsible for the maintenance of public morals. These laws were spontaneously upheld, depending on who was in charge, but generally involved a crackdown on luxury goods, especially foods. The Praetors, the senior officials one step below the consuls, were responsible for legal injunctions, smaller-scale revolts and banditry, and often dealt with capital crimes. Aediles, responsible for the upkeep of the city, took care of general security, policing public spaces, and petty crime. Finally, the Tresviri Capitales were 3 junior officials who were responsible for Rome's jail, a small space just meant to hold people until their trial, and executions. They supervised the night watch and dealt with some minor crimes, mainly against lower-class citizens. At first, these politicians were generally capable of handling issues within the city. However, as the population grew, more issues began to arise which required a larger group to contain them. Let's now trace this expansion of the policing force. At the immediate disposal of the officials we just mentioned were a group of individuals known as Lictors. Lictors were essentially bodyguards, musclemen, and marks of status assigned to the various magistrates based on the prominence of their position. They were equipped with a symbolic axe tied with a bundle of rods. The rods were a symbol of punishment, the axe of execution. The lictors were essentially the strong arm of the law in this period and could be sent to manage any issue that their magistrate required, including arrests, crowd control, and even investigations. Julius Caesar, for example, was responsible for sending his lictors into people's homes to enforce morality laws, taking delicacies from their dining room tables. Such a small task force, though, could only handle issues while things were relatively calm. However, this would cease to be the case as the Roman Republic faced increasing uprisings and civil war by the 1st century BC. To deal with this turmoil, the Senate issued almost regular orders known as the Senatus Consultum to bring mercenaries into the city as riot police. In these troubling times, private protection too became prevalent as things continued to get worse. Bandits preyed on the countryside, gangs plagued the cities, and even the rich turned on one another, with hit lists in the form of the prescriptions. After many years, the unrest would finally begin to subside with the rise of Augustus Caesar. One of his first big moves was to roll back the tide of banditry. To do so, he tasked a small force to sweep across the Italian peninsula and bust up as many groups of highway robbers and kidnappers as possible. Augustus then sought to establish a more permanent state of security that was promised under the Pax Romana. This would be done by creating outposts along the roads. Each would have its own group of men who patrolled the surrounding area, creating crime-free, or at least bandit-free, zones. Later emperors, noting the popularity of these policing stations, added more to double down on the offered security. Augustus was eventually obliged to continue the experiment in the city of Rome itself, but due to its massive size, the traditional complement of lictors would not be enough for what he had in mind. Therefore, Augustus broke with one of the main republican norms by allowing the permanent stationing of troops within the city. These men would serve not only as his official bodyguard, but as a personal army and as a guarantor of safety within the city itself. But most important of all, in the age of the emperor, this group would monopolize the use of violence to consolidate power behind the throne. So who were the members of this new policing force? Well, they were a mix of several thousand military and quasi-military forces housed throughout the city. These included the Praetorian Guard, the Urban Cohorts, and the Vigiles. The Praetorian Guard were actually veteran bodyguard units from the last civil war, while the Urban Cohorts were new units raised to reinforce them. Both groups were soldiers who enjoyed higher pay and shorter service lengths than standard legionaries. There were initially 3 Praetorian Cohorts and 3 Urban Cohorts in Rome, though their number would fluctuate over the years. Generally, they were responsible for the security of the imperial household and the suppression of unrest in large public spaces. The Vigiles, on the other hand, were organized civilians, rather than soldiers, who primarily handled firefighting and night patrols. There's of course a lot more nuance involved with each of their respective organizations and roles, but this should give you a decent overview. Let's now cover how they worked in action. We'll begin with the more militarized Praetorian Guard and Urban Cohorts before following up with the Vigiles. One of the major duties of the armed guard was to, well, guard people. Primarily, this meant the imperial household. The emperor, his family, and his close associates would of course be covered, but specific protection for other individuals could be provided or revoked depending on the situation. If a person outside of the imperial household was assigned a squad of Praetorian guardsmen though, it was not necessarily for their well-being. Rather, such a display of force would be used to let that person know that they were being watched closely by the emperor. The level of intimidation could get to ridiculous highs. We have records, for instance, of Praetorians standing outside of a person's door at all hours of night and day, talking loudly about potential crimes and their punishments. This proved so bad that many could be driven to commit suicide rather than face the threats held over them. If political targets were to be apprehended instead, the guard could just throw them into their own prison, which could host captives for far longer than Rome's traditional jail. Another aspect of guard duty was to have troops stationed at strategic points around the city during major events. In this way, they could both provide security for the event itself and deter burglars from taking advantage of people while being away from their homes. Some of the rowdiest places requiring attention were not just the games of the gladiatorial arenas, but also the chariot races and the theaters of the pantomimes and playwrights. Historically, we know that these were constantly staffed by a squadron of the Urban Cohorts or Praetorians themselves. Only one attempt was ever made to remove this level of hard-eyed security by Nero, who was quickly forced by the public to allow the soldiers to return, since the bloodshed by the crowd was reaching absurd levels. The security of the games, though, was not only about preventing members of the audience from murdering each other. They were also an opportunity for political espionage, in which these soldiers were also heavily engaged. Praetorians were not only used in ceremonial garb to protect the emperor himself, but were also stationed throughout the crowd, often in plain clothes. These undercover guards would not only watch who attended, but also who they sat with, what they did, and when they would applaud. These men might even sit beside people and attempt to entrap them into speaking against the emperor, at which point an arrest would promptly be made. The troops did not just focus on fixed targets, but could also provide regular patrols throughout the city to deter insurrection. Such missions were obviously increased during times of crisis. In addition, the general availability of a large pool of trained manpower in the city meant that they could be put to work on all sorts of things. These tasks included civil construction, escorting work, political espionage, investigations, arrests, torture, and execution. Now that we've covered the typical guard duties of the Praetorians and Urban Cohorts, let's turn to the Vigiles. The Vigiles had their root in previous firefighting initiatives, which often took the form of privately owned fire brigades operating under some state control. During the reign of Augustus, for instance, a young Aedile named Ignatius Rufus used his position to fund a firefighting slave gang. Yet his success and self-aggrandizement bothered Augustus, who showed little patience for any usurpation of his authority, and later had Rufus executed for conspiracy against the Roman state. His example, though, was a good one, and Augustus promptly copied him. He began with a corps of 600 state-owned slaves, which Aediles would supervise. Unfortunately, their small numbers and organizational structure proved ineffective. Thus, Augustus tried another option. In 7 BC, he divided the city into regions, which were further divided into neighborhoods. Each neighborhood had a watch leader who would have control over a small number of state-owned slaves as a fire brigade, and they were responsible for their own areas. The districts would oversee the neighborhoods, keeping things nicely focused. These efforts, while helpful, still did not solve the problem entirely, since a totally dispersed force lacked the ability to mobilize against larger threats. Thus, in 6 AD, Augustus ordered the establishment of additional firefighting units modeled after the Fire Brigade of Alexandria. These were the Vigiles, a force of several thousand-strong freedmen divided into 7 cohorts, each of which were assigned a pair of city regions with their own headquarters. The primary job of the Vigiles was firefighting. However, while they certainly sought to put out flames, it proved far more efficient to simply contain them with fire breaks. This was achieved by actually destroying structures in the path of the fire, with hammers, pickaxes, and even artillery. An emphasis was also placed on taking preventative measures to prevent outbreaks in the first place by establishing night patrols and investigating cases of arson and negligence. Thus, their role actually evolved into providing security against not only fire, but also crime. While on patrol, they could dissuade mischief, driving down rates of assault, theft, and burglary. Corruption inevitably grew rampant among the forces in charge of Rome's security. The Praetorian Guard, of course, was infamous for this, with Sejanus attempting to usurp the authority of Tiberius, who employed the Vigiles to arrest him. The Guard also auctioned off the emperorship itself in 193 in a particularly unashamed display of their power as kingmakers. The Vigiles too could be just as abusive, if simply focused more so on the common people, from whom we hear less about. For instance, we know of one particularly notorious instance in 64 AD during the Great Fire of Rome, when the Vigiles were said to have set more fires themselves to give an opportunity to steal from the people who fled the scene. Despite this, the city guard and watch were still incredibly popular among the community, and successive emperors increased their number and scope, not only within the city of Rome itself, but also in Rome's major ports in Ostia and Puteoli. There, they would help the marines of the Roman navy, patrolling the roads between Rome and the harbor cities, policing the harbors themselves, and even assisting customs agents. One interesting role of the marines was that they were regularly present at games and amphitheaters. They would be responsible, for instance, for setting up the awnings that would shade the crowd, as well as offering additional security. Over time, as the institutions became more powerful, so too did the people in charge of them. The prefect of the Vigiles, for instance, became one of the major figures of law enforcement in Rome for smaller crimes, petty theft, burglaries, robberies, assaults, and other non-capital charges. For anything more serious, he would defer to the urban prefect, who was the top figure for criminal justice below the emperor himself, responsible for all major crimes and the safety of the city as a whole. He was the commander of the Urban Cohorts and even had significant authority in regions of Rome around the city. In some cases, his power eclipsed even the emperor himself. Thus we've seen that the security in the city of ancient Rome was ever evolving, from From humble origins, it grew to an apparatus of near modern proportions, with almost 10,000 men protecting the city at all times. Yet this represented just one small fragment of the entire security system in place for the Pax Romana at large. Stay tuned for future episodes as we turn to law enforcement across the Empire. A huge thanks is owed to our patrons for funding this episode. Please consider contributing to get previews of future content and downloads of the amazing art for each episode. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to like and subscribe for more history, and check out these other videos. See you in the next one.